Hey folks, welcome to the Season 1 finale of Corex and Coffeecast. I'm your host, Pete Steele.
And I'm your other host, Rick Hendricks. We're all about bringing new people into the hobby and pushing back hard against the stereotype that gamers are asocial beings.
For our Season 1 finale, we actually have a special treat. We have two guests today. Please welcome back Sarah Vasa, our editor of all things.
Hi.
Hey Sarah, how's it going?
Oh, it's going.
And we also have our producer with us today, Keegan King.
Hi, everybody.
What's up?
Oh, not a heck of a lot. It's again, always weird to be on this side of the recording.
That's fair.
Yeah.
We do want to acknowledge that we also have a behind-the-scenes person, Ms. Shaw, who is our game enthusiast consultant. Unfortunately, she could not be here with us for the Season 1 finale, but hopefully she'll be here on the podcast as a guest in the future. For episode 10, we've each of the four of us have chosen our top 3 games that are best suited for coffee shop play. So it's actually a top 12 list rather than top 10. So without further ado, Keegan, why don't you take it away?
Well, I would love to. I also want to I do this at the end of every episode, but I'm going to steal this from Sarah because she wanted to say it. I do want to thank all of our listeners also for getting us to the Season 10.
Wow!
Yeah, what up now? But it is pretty cool. No, like realistically, like having been on podcasts before, like getting to the end of the season is a big deal. So thank you guys for listening. And Sarah, joking aside, do you want to say anything before I jump in?
No, I was going to put it at the end, but hey, maybe I'll put it at the end still.
That could work.
But seriously, folks, thanks for being here with us.
It's the bane of my existence, but I'm glad it's good for you. Joking aside, the prompt was to not only think of like our favorite games, but really like more thinking about what games could actually be played at a coffee shop. And I started with the game Spaceteam. I'm not sure exactly how good this would be at a coffee shop, but we'll get into that.
It's a bold choice.
Basically, this game is a frantic group game where you're all trying to fix your ship that's falling into a black hole. You've got 5 minutes, there's a sand timer with the game, and each player needs to work together to fix all the parts of the ship. All of the cards in the deck are given out equally to everybody, and to add confusion, you're all basically supposed to scream at each other, and you can only pass cards to the person directly next to you. So if Pete and I are sitting across from each other, and there's people like, Sarah Vasa on one side and Rick on the other, like I can't pass stuff directly to Pete. I have to go through an intermediary, which is great, except for you're trying to fix a ship in 5 minutes.
All while yelling at each other.
And you're trying to keep track of 100 things while new things are piling on from the automated soundtrack, right?
So, funny story. We actually didn't use a soundtrack for this one, which we could have, but yes, you could. We actually just did this at a place called Mox Cafe. Myself, Pete, Sarah, and then our game enthusiast, Ms. Shaw, we actually got together and played this game for the first time at Mox Cafe in Portland. Not sponsored, but please sponsor us. Through the pandemic, it's hard, too, because, you can't play a ton of games that, bring people together as much. But this game is so frenetic and crazy, and we were yelling and having a great time. And even though people didn't approach us necessarily, you could see people looking our way, and it was really fun. It's also fun because the first time you play it, everyone's like, oh, this will be easy. And then you get to the 4-minute mark, and you realize you haven't done anything, and you're about to die. So it's a crazy fun game. It only takes 5 minutes. All the components are really good for coffee shops as well. They're plasticky cards, so that was my kind of first thought.
Yeah, my experience playing this was that the timer, the little sand timer, I forgot about it completely. And maybe because it wasn't right in front of me, but there were just so many other things happening. So much was going on that you just get so wrapped up into this game.
And it's a game that I think that people who are around you, if you're playing in public, be it a coffee shop or a pub or wherever else, they can't not notice, right? They might not come up to you, but because you are going to be screaming and yelling and shouting and hullabalooing, people will take notice of this group of people at this table doing something and hopefully having a good time. It's not a silent activity.
Well, they seem to be having a good time.
And they do a really good job of making it fun to lose together.
Yeah.
So you'll get to the end of your planning stage and then you'll sort of see how it all played out. And you'll realize sometimes very quickly, this didn't go well. But it's so fun to see the ship continue to burn down as you go through turn after turn after turn, where you're pressing buttons that aren't powered because nobody powered it. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Not only is it nice components, it's short. We managed to play, I think, 2 to 3 games between appetizers and drinks and stuff. So worked out really well. Really fun sidebar. There's a not safe for work version that is hilarious because you're yelling out the names of the tools and stuff. And so if you want to have a lot of fun, keep in mind who's around you, but that's a good one.
Dirty words.
Who's next?
The first game I want to mention is actually a little bit of a moldy oldie, which is Skull, which came out in 2011, designed by Harvey Marley, published by Asmodee. And I say published by Asmodee because it's published in this tight little box and these beautiful skulls and roses inside. But I do want to point out, you don't need to buy a published version of this game to play. You can play with coasters, you could draw on napkins or draw on cardboard or playing cards or something like that. It's really easy. But the idea is that you and your opponents, and you want to have at least 2 or 3 other opponents or more, are trying to collect roses and not get hit with a skull. For each player, you put down 3 rose coasters in front of them and 1 skull coaster, and they shuffle them and can place them face down in any order. And then you go around and players bid on how many coasters they think they can pick up. But they pick up 1 coaster from each player round robin, and then they go again and again. They can't just choose to pick up 2 coasters from one person and 2 from another, right? And so they bet, I think I can pick up 2 coasters without getting a skull. And the next player says, I think I can pick up 3 and pick up 4. And eventually you go around and somebody will say, I can pick up 5. And everyone else around the table passes and basically says, okay, go, let's see you do it. And if they get all of the roses and don't get a skull, then they win. Then they get a point. But if they get 1 skull, then they lose one of the 4 coasters in front of them at random. And so then they have less ability to influence the nature of the skulls or roses in front of them. So you only need 2 points to win this game. It's really simple to play. It's really simple to teach. And what's great about it is that players think, especially hardcore gamers, like, this is a simple game. I'm not going to bother with this. This is silly. But I have seen time and time and time again that new gamers or game enthusiasts, people who've never played this game before, constantly win against experienced gamers, because experienced gamers think it's going to be easy. It's not. Very simple mechanically, but this is a game that is just purely playing the other players. It's poker without the chips.
A lot of psychology and yeah.
When I explain it to experienced gamers, I inevitably see this smirk come across their face of like, why are we playing this game? I'm going to crush it. Why are we doing this? And as soon as you're into the second or third round, that smirk just goes away and it's replaced by this snarl and this grimace of frustration as they just lose coaster after coaster after coaster. And then they realize, there's more to this game than I realized.
It's like a perfectly simple game.
Perfectly simple game.
But still has like this really intense air of strategy that I love.
Yeah.
And it's always good to have the newbie start cleaning up a little bit. Nice confidence boost.
Yeah. And I think you're so right, Pete, is that you mentioned that, yes, this game is published, but you don't have to play with the published game to play this. I mean, like, we're talking about this as a coffee shop game, and sure, you absolutely can do that. I think this is also a perfect pub game, because pubs tend to have coasters.
Yeah.
And so, really, you can just whip this out on the fly if you're with friends and you just want something to do, a game to play.
So we're going to move on to a game that you definitely do need the published version. This is the Fuzzies, published 2021, developed by Alex Haig, Justin Vickers, Wolfgang Warsch, published by CMYK and Schmidt Spiel. So the Fuzzies is this visually appealing reflex game, which consists mainly of a tower of multicolored fuzzballs and a plastic pedestal that they sit on. The whole package fits nicely into an oversized cup, and it almost looks like you're bringing in a smoothie with all these discrete little balls inside of it. It's very easy to transport. Setup is also a breeze. You mainly turn it upside down, lift the cup off, and you're good. All of these little fuzzballs are precariously stacked on the plastic base. So this game plays a bit like Jenga if Jenga was made out of dandelion seeds.
That is the best descriptor ever.
I love that visual.
So this isn't the game to try playing outside.
This sounds horrible. This sounds absolutely horrible.
This sounds amazing.
Hard disagree. This sounds adorable. It sounds like you're playing a game with chinchillas.
Powerful gusts of wind are going to be a real problem here. You're going to need a table you can control pretty well.
I'm frustrated already. I'm so frustrated already.
I'm loving how divisive this game is already making us.
So the fuzzballs tend to cling together and clump a little bit, more than you'd think. So anyway, on your turn, you'll accept the tweezers from a previous player and draw a card that has the same color as some of the fuzzies. And that color is now the only color you're able to interact with. You have to pick off this little fuzzy and put it higher on the tower than where you took it from. Unlike, say, Jenga, it doesn't have to go all the way to the top. It just has to rest higher than it started.
This sounds a little bit like that game Pickup Sticks. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like an interesting turn on it. Like,
Sure. So, unlike Jenga, which tends to be all fine or crash spectacularly with no in between, if you mess up in Jenga, the game is done and you have to start over. You almost always knock a few of these fuzzies off the tower. And as long as it's just a few, you keep on playing.
How many is a few?
It's less than 10.
Okay.
As the instructions say, you know it when you see it.
Okay.
You mess up a little bit, that's fine. You still got a job to do. You take your target fuzzy and you put it back up higher on the tower. But once that's done, you have to draw as many penalty cards as you lost fuzzies. Now this is limited to 3 per turn, but if you knocked 2 fuzzies off, you pick 2 of these penalty cards. And then your turn is done, you pass off the tweezers to the next person, it's their go. But when the round comes around again, those penalty cards penalize you in moving your next fuzzy, which makes it more likely that you're going to cause a problem, which makes it more likely that you're going to have more problems to deal with on the next successive turn. Your penalties go away once you've successfully transplanted a fuzzy up to stack. Any new penalties that you've earned are stuck with you for the next turn. So anyway, once the tower finally topples, or at least more than 10 go off, the game is over and you've lost. So the great thing about this game is it's so visually striking. It's gonna draw some positive attention. People are gonna notice it from across the room. And the other great thing is the rules are so easy that you could probably just recruit somebody who's looking at you and have them playing with you like immediately. One thing to note is the fuzzies are sneaky little buggers, so you're going to want to keep a close eye on them so they don't roll off the table and you lose them. But other than that, it's a lot of fun.
In talking about fuzzies that are cute and adorable, I want to bring up the game Solar Draft, which may not sound cute and adorable, but I'm excited to tell you more about it.
You love this game. Every 2 minutes, you're like, let's play Solar Draft. Let's play Solar Draft.
I want to explain why. It's designed by Zach Moore and published by Tasty Minstrel Games, and it's a 2 to 4 player game that has an open market, hand management, tableau placement, and variable player powers. And that's a lot of jargon, but basically you try to build a solar system with a sun that has the variable player power, and then you place planets, moons, and comets in a tableau in a certain order to maximize the points that they will give you based on their abilities.
can you give me like an example of the abilities you're talking about?
Yeah, some of the cards will say double the points of all of the moons on this card. Others will say you can't count this card if it's next to a large planet, or if this is the smallest or the largest planet in your solar system, you get an extra 8 points. Things like that.
Got it. So they're pretty different.
Yeah, they're all different.
That's cool.
And I've been asked so many times why I like this game, and I don't know, I think it's been very difficult for me to explain why. Maybe it's because there's an air of not knowing exactly how well your opponent is doing, but you're still able to like hate draft and see their cards on the other side of the table, but you can't read, the powers that their cards have, or, all of the pieces that's going into their solar system. And it's a really good game for new gamers. It introduces the variable player power without seeming overwhelming or confusing necessarily. And it's also really cute and approachable and good for kids too. And what I mean by cute and approachable is that these suns that have the variable player power, they have different characterizations, right? You can tell that there's different personalities for each sun. And then the moons all have faces, the planets all have faces, and the best part in my mind is that the comets are cats.
I'm sorry, could you repeat comets are cats?
The comets are cats. They have little ears and cat faces, and the comets are cats. Like, I don't really know what else to say about that.
I feel like anything that has 9 lives should not also come screeching down and kill the dinosaurs. But
okay, but they're not killing the dinosaurs. They're making your solar system cute and have different abilities, and
High scoring.
It's great. Yeah, high scoring, exactly.
I'm taking a strong pro-dinosaur stance here against listeners. I'm sorry.
Okay, but I'm taking a strong pro-cat stance here, and that may have been very obvious if you ever read our show notes, because, as it will say, Sarah, wrangler of cats. So it's really no surprise that I love this game so much.
So I love that this game introduces incomplete information in a approachable way, especially for kids and for new players, of like, I can see what's going on over there. I don't necessarily know what it means. And that's a great place to explore for gaming.
Yeah, and because it also has this open market, like, you know, there's 5 cards between you and the other player or players, and you can have a sense of which card they pick and what that might mean, but there's so much happening both in your solar system that you're trying to figure out, and it's impossible to keep track of the other person's solar system. So you may know that they picked up a card that means that if they have more moons, they might have more points. So you can only do 2 actions per turn. So it's not necessarily that you're picking up that card from the middle and then playing it immediately. It might sit in your hand for a round or 2, or you may never play it at all. But this is really one of my favorite games to start games night or over coffee on the weekend before the day starts. It doesn't take too much time. It doesn't take too much thought either. And I found it was a really easy game to pick up.
I actually want to mention a few issues I have with this game. Like, I've enjoyed my time with it, but my time has been a couple hours with it, and I'm kind of done with this game. And one problem I have is that it's solar draft, and on the face of the box, there are kind of architect's tools. So it's like, okay, like a drafting table. You're drafting this solar system. That's cute. But then inside the box, you have these incongruent, cartoony faces and cats. And I'm like, okay, is this like cartoons for kids, or is this?
It's cartoons and cats for Sarah is what it is.
Yeah, maybe that's right. The other issue I have with this game is it comes in this tiny little box, which is great. I'm all about board games being condensed into smaller boxes rather than taking up more cardboard and space that they need. But everything about the look of this game makes me think that you can play it on a small cafe table in a coffee shop. And you really can't with this game. This game takes up way more table space than it should for the amount of game that there is to play. Especially if you're playing with more than 2 people. I mean, if you have all of your solar system cards out, I mean, I laid it out on a table for a 4-player game. I've never played with 4 players. I've only played 1 versus 1. But I laid it all out, and it took up, in order to see all the cards, it took up a 5x5 table. That's ridiculous for a game where it's very simple, there's not much there, and for a game that fits in your back pocket like a cell phone. It just makes no sense to me.
I hear that, and my suggestion is to make a double layer under your solar system rather than one long line. Like, there's ways to work around that.
Well, we're going to disagree on that, but that's okay. Let's move on.
Well, that was our round 1, so hope you guys enjoyed that. Round 2, starting up again with me. I'm going to bring up another game about falling into a black hole. I really think I need to go back to therapy, guys. This game is called Lux Aeterna. Everyone should go to therapy. Therapy is very important. So the game is called Lux Aeterna. It was made in 2021, year of our Lord. I don't know why I said it like that. It's designed by Tony Boydell and art by Alex Lee. Pause real quick here. The art is phenomenal. So one thing I just want to quickly say before I jump into the rest of the game. The art in Lux Aeterna shows a person character, a character you were supposed to put yourself on. And even though it's done silhouette style, this character is drawn in such a way, and I guess accessorized is the term, in such a way that it's very androgynous. So you are able to like put yourself in the position of the character, which I thought was a really neat little thing. So I just wanted to send up to Alex Lee. That's a nice piece of I don't know what you would call that, but a nice piece of design.
They managed to get a lot of character into that blank slate.
Yeah, and it's cool, especially because this is a solo game. An episode or two ago, Rick, you brought this game up too. But anyway, this game is made by Frosted Games in Germany, produced here in the US by Capstone Games. And it's a solo game about falling backwards towards a black hole, and you're trying to fix your ship again. In this case, because it's a solo game, you have 15 minutes to either fix 3 or more of your subsystems, or making sure they're in the under repair thing, or draw all the cards in the deck. Those are your two sort of like end game conditions. Your lose game conditions are losing 4 or more subsystems crashing, or, of course, falling into the black hole, or running out of time. So it's kind of neat. Like, you draw all the cards, you win, you run out of time, you lose. And the timer, there's an app for it, but you can just run a 15-minute timer. The app is kind of cool, though, because it has sound effects and stuff. At the end, the whole point of the solo game is to basically add up all the points for your end state and try to beat your previous score, which I really like. It's a good cafe game because A, you can play it by yourself. B, it sort of against Solar Draft, this is a game that takes up a very small amount of space. It'd be very easy to play on a cafe by yourself. Things are starting to open right now, but it is still COVID, so there is that piece of like, well, maybe you don't want people joining in necessarily, but you want them to like, they can see you, they can interact. This is a game you can play by yourself, 15 minutes with a coffee, it's great. And my favorite part about it is that because it's a timer, you can pause it. I actually played this game cooking holiday dinner, Thanksgiving specifically, last year, because nobody in my immediate family, apparently, on my partner's side, can cook. So I was stuck basically doing all this work. But there's all this downtime, right? You're cooking a turkey, you're cooking a pie, whatever. So I had ways to cover myself, and because it was solo, I could do it from the kitchen table while I was prepping. So I really like it. I think Lux Aeterna was a nice job all around.
But do you think it's a good game to bring people into the hobby?
I think yes, in the sense that a lot of the times, so for me at least, and players like me, I think the answer is yes. One of the biggest complaints I hear from my board game friends, especially ones who don't have partners or friends that like to play board games, is that, well, I can't play a game by myself, Keegan. And it turns out you really can. I think Lux Aeterna is neat because it's low intensity. The instructions are really good. And it's fast enough that you can kind of like find yourself getting into a good loop of playing the game. And it's, again, solo games are nice for that reason. You don't have to have someone else. And, personal story, my partner saw me playing it and she got interested in it. Because it is fun. It is cool looking. And again, little things like the design I talked about really draw the eye in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's an easy thing to stop and talk about. So I would say yes to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right after Keegan talks about a game about falling into a black hole, I'm actually going to talk about a game themed on a aging vampire losing their memory.
How is this not my game?
I don't know, man. When we divvied up the games, this is what I got. I mean, I fought for it. And this is 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, 2019 by Tim Hutchings. And this game, his entire game, is in a book. And you can buy a physical book, which kind of looks like a journal, but a printed PDF or a digital PDF that you can print is also available, or not print, for cheap. And in this game, it's a solo game, and you go through this book or PDF after you kind of create your initial character, which I'll get to in a second, and you follow the prompts in this book. And each prompt is essentially a memory that you have to navigate based on different skills and possessions and mortal and immortal relationships that your character has throughout the game, right? Here's the thing, though, is that your memories are fleeting. You're this aging vampire and you can't remember everything from your life. So as you progress through the prompts based on dice rolls, essentially, you write down your reaction to each prompt, and you have to categorize your reaction to each prompts under different types of memories. If an encounter cannot be properly categorized under one of 5 memories, you have to erase one of your 5 memories, and you can't draw on that memory or what you've written to inform future prompts. So you're evolving constantly as a character, just like in real life. Our memories and our skills and our experiences from memories from 20, 30 years ago are faded. We don't remember them. We don't remember them at all, compared to just having this repository that you can look up encyclopedically.
You can't call on your friend from 30 years ago to help you necessarily.
Exactly, because you've fallen out of touch with them because you haven't interacted in 30 years, or they may be dead, or whatever else. So I think it's a great take on it, and it's so frustrating, hopefully in a good way. I mean, I've played through this game 3 or 4 times. Hopefully in a good way it's frustrating because it forces you to make these really difficult choices. And if you're really engaged with the game in a good headspace, that's fun. And if you're kind of already frustrated, it's like, I don't want to give up any of these things. Well, of course you can cheat. It's a solo game. The only person you're cheating is your own experience. Or you can modify it. If you want to keep 7 or 8 or 9 experiences, like, go for it. Who's going to stop you?
I really love these solo role-playing games that you're seeing in books. Like Kane's Jawbone's a really popular one I think about.
Yeah.
Obviously, Choose Your Own Adventure. Like, this sounds like a really cool, like, extension of that. And then, of course, like Iron Sword. So back to the solo game thing, like, I just think that's really neat.
I also love these narrative games that give you enough of a prodding every time to keep you moving and really let you make this sort of a story.
Here's the thing, though, is that game or no, I mean, you can sit down and curl up in a coffee shop with a good book, right? People do this all the time. So why not make it a gaming book that you can either play the game out of or just immerse yourself in the narrative and the story? Read some prompts, write your own, whatnot, choose the adventure. I mean, this is really how Choose Your Own Adventure books should have been. Mm-hmm. And I think about all these other role-playing game books that I own, be it, Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or Masquerade or Shadowrun or, on and on and on and on and on. I have shelves and shelves of these books. I have more role-playing campaign books than I will ever be able to run campaigns for in my life. And this is a very common gamer problem. However, I absolutely do have the time, if I make the time, to take each of these books, curl up in bed or in a coffee shop, cafe, whatever, and just immerse myself in the story and the artwork and the world that these books provide. And I think that's great.
I'm really fascinated by this. Like, this sounds really cool and intriguing and not something that I've tried before. However, and I get that this is going to be a very controversial statement, but I can't, I mean, maybe this is just my own generation and teen years.
Spill it, Vasa.
Anything vampire related, I think of Twilight.
No.
And as someone who's neither Team Edward nor Team Jacob, and I understand that's a very controversial position as well, I don't know how to get over that.
That's weird. I don't know where Sarah went. She must have gotten cut out of the entire episode. Weird.
Sarah's gone. Out of the company.
No, but that's actually an interesting point, like, thinking about these games. Because, like, I'm definitely of the generation that was Choose Your Own Adventure. Pete, I know you are. Rick, I know you are. And that is an interesting, like, take on it. It's one that I will definitely scream about the minute I go to mute myself. But, yeah.
So what Sarah clearly does not know, and our listeners may or may not know, is that the vampire mythos and canon is chock full of amazing literature and movies and other types of things that you can sink your teeth into. See what I did there?
Wow, Pete got cut too. That's weird.
That have nothing to do with Twilight. Thank goodness.
That's fair. Again, it just ruined everything vampire related for me because that's all anybody in my age group wanted to watch, and I was just not about it. I thought it was stupid.
You were right to think that. Taking a hard stance, pro-dinosaur stance, anti-Twilight stance here on Corax and Coffee.
Okay.
Rick, I think, did you have a game that you want to talk about?
I did.
Help us out, Rick.
So moving from a game that you could play for hours and hours to a game that you can finish in half an hour, I'm going to talk about Furnace. Now, we've talked about Furnace already. If you've been on the website, you've seen our unboxing video, which, if you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. Furnace is a game that came out in 2021, designed by Ivan Lashin. Now, Furnace revolves around a number of beautifully illustrated factories, which are up for auction. Each turn, players bid on the available companies with 4 ranked bidding chips. So they're labeled 4, 3, 2, 1. And the winner of each auction gets to keep the factory and use it to extract and exchange materials. Now, everyone else who bid on the property but didn't win it receives some compensation. They're able to use the factory once to do something different. Sometimes you actually want to lose the auctions because the one-time benefit of the compensation is more useful to you right now than the factory would be. So once these auctions are resolved and you own some factories, you can put them in any order you like to convert oil, steel, and coal into one another and straight into money. At the end of 4 rounds of auctions and production, the player with the most money wins. I really like Furnace because it brings a lot of crunch and high-level strategy into just half an hour to an hour. It keeps things moving fast enough and it's compact enough to fit into a visit to the coffee shop. It's probably best to know the rules beforehand, though. Board Game Teacher has a video on YouTube that'll get you up and running with the game in about 6 minutes. So this is something you can get going on very quickly.
Now, Rick, I'm going to weigh in here, right? And when I first saw news about Furnace, I was really excited because it looked like this game themed on, the titans of industry of the mid-19th century, and it looked like it was compacting everything that's good about a Euro game into a tight 30 minutes. And I was super excited about that because I love Euro games, but many people don't because they're too complex to get into the rules, because they're too number crunchy, because they're too long, because you have to think about too many things, and so on and so forth. So to me, when this first came out, I was like, this is a gateway Euro game, and this is great. I have to have this to play for myself and enjoy, but also as a tool in my own toolbox to bring people into that type of game. And it is gorgeous. And when I got my copy, I was so excited. It is absolutely gorgeous. But when I played it, it just fell flat for me.
Oh.
I'm not saying it's bad. I am saying, it's not for me, which was a big bummer for me because I really wanted to like it.
Were you looking for more crunch or?
I think we were looking for more player interaction.
We definitely were, which I know, if you're saying, oh, well, then you're not really looking for a Euro game if you're looking for a strong player interactions. And I get that. But not only was there no player interaction almost at all, there was nothing that, going back to the vampire theme, nothing to really sink my teeth into. It was, you're doing this engine building, and I really like engine building, and I really like bidding. But so you have a bidding phase and then an engine building phase. And the bidding phase, as innovative as it is with these chips, it was boring. It was frustrating, but in a bad way, and frustrating in a boring way. And then we did the engine building, which was fine, but there really wasn't very much there. And then we go back to this frustrating bidding thing, like, oh, I just want to go back to this engine building, but there's nothing to immerse myself in there. So it just didn't work for me. It is, however, absolutely stunningly beautiful.
Absolutely.
And that's also not to say that it's not work for other people.
Sure.
Transitioning to a game that did work for me, Ohanami, designed by Stefan Bendorf and published by Pandasaurus Games. This game is another small box game. Simple drafting over the course of 3 rounds with variable point allocation per round and card placing and up to 3 tableaus per player that represent different Japanese gardens, of all things. I find this game really simple and fun. It requires a light amount of strategy and it's not overly complex. It's also not heavy on the theme, but the cards do have a Japanese garden theme, which is simple and delicate and beautiful and frankly refreshing. We've talked about a lot of space games thus far, and here's something a little different. And because of this, I think it has a little something for everyone. It has some strategy, it has drafting, but it's still very light. There's art and there's math.
I love Ohanami, and I'm going to say that if I were ever to take a board game and load it into a t-shirt gun and just fire random copies into a stadium full of people, hoping they get hooked on it, Ohanami would be my ammo. I would just love to fire round after round of this game into a crowd and say, play this, try this, see if you like this.
Yeah, I gifted this game to my dad, who likes cards, likes card games, and is not a huge game person. He's an engineer. He likes math. And he also likes gardening. So really, it seems like the best fit for him.
What's really funny is, like, I like this game in theory, and I'm just like, I'm going to be Pete for a second. I don't know what it is, but the theme of the game never catches me. I always think about the game Hanabi, which is like not basically the same. They're very similar games, but Hanabi uses fireworks instead. And for some reason, like, that's the game I attach to. Does anyone else have like a moment like that?
I definitely hear you. There's a lot of similarity there. I think it's important to have games that stray outside of the normal themes, as admittedly both of those do. But Keegan, you and I are solidly in the smack middle of the stereotypical gamer niche,
Yeah.
where everybody's aiming for. And I think it's very important to have games that aim for people who don't fit into that niche, who don't love zombies and war games and, spaceship battles and all the things that we love.
Yeah. And it's incredibly important because, like, I mean, the thing about Hanabi is that you're right. It definitely, it's explosions, right? Regardless of how pretty it is.
Sure.
You have a good point.
Yeah, this game isn't overbearing like that to me. For me, Ohanami is what I would describe as a perfect travel game. It's in such a small box. It's so easy to throw in a bag or in a pocket. And the setup only requires shuffling. So you can play this while you're waiting for your plane to board or while you're traveling by train. And yes, of course, in coffee shops. It's so easy to set up and play, and it only takes 20 minutes to really get through all 3 rounds. So if you're anything like me, you'll want to play many times over, which allows the game to take up time that you might otherwise spend doing nothing in those situations. And my favorite memory playing this game was while vacationing on the Oregon coast. It was chilly out, drinks were beside myself and my opponent, the ocean breeze and spectacular views were in the background, and we were just enjoying each other's company, the scenery, and the game all at once. The game didn't take away from any aspect of this beautiful scenery that we were finding ourselves in and each other's company. It was peaceful, it was serene, and I think the game honestly added to that ambiance. It also added a hint of competitiveness and a few dozen laughs and some eye rolls too. So, all in all, this game brings up some good memories for me too.
Who is this mystery companion you're playing games with on the beach?
I shall never tell.
I'm going to tweet about it later. I think so. That was a nice end to round 2. I'm excited for this sequel to Love Actually.
Oh my god.
I've got one last game I'm going to talk about, and it's funny because the games aren't in any particular order, and yet I still put this one as my number 1 game I've discovered so far. This game is called Roll Player. That's ROLL Player. Came out in 2016, made by Keith. Last name I will not pronounce correctly, and I feel terrible about that. Produced by Thunderworks. This is a game that basically I think was designed, back to your point, Rick, for people exactly like you and me. Mm-hmm. This game makes building an RPG, like a D&D character, a game. It basically gamifies session 0. And actually, I've recently discovered there's a large group of people who will actually play a round of Roll Player, build a character, and then use that character in their next D&D campaign, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, it is.
There's 2 expansions where you can get more of the races involved. I actually just picked up the Monsters and Minions version, which allowed me to have like a tiefling and those kinds of things. They obviously use different names because it's not produced by Wizards of the Coast, but Thunderworks does an awesome job. And the whole thing about this game is that it takes up a very small amount of space, and the main component, which I've just now realized is my favorite component. For Pete, that's cards. For me, that's dice. You roll d6 every turn. and you place them on initiative markers. So people get to, an initiative basically is in the core version of the game, which I'll talk about, is the players going to basically going to the store to use gold to buy new weapons and armor. Again, the kind of stuff that you'd buy in a session 0.
Sure. 10-foot poles, weapons, that sort of thing.
Yeah, nothing particularly powerful or magic. In the expansions, you can find some of that, and there's an adventures version of this game. It's about $150. It's a little bit out of the coffee shop stuff, but there's a version of this game you can play that actually is like a playable D&D version. What I love about this game is sort of two things. So this was another solo game, and initially that's what I was going to talk about. Like, this is another game, but I can play by myself because I don't have anyone to play with. But my partner loves games, but she doesn't have time for it. We're both mental health people aside from this, and so we do a lot of different stuff. She's often pretty beat up from the day, and a lot of games require a lot of player interaction. This game, all the player interaction is done via rolling the dice, selecting the dice that you want to select. You can sort of hate draft each other and buy stuff from the market, but really you're playing against yourself. You're trying to build the best character you can build, not so much taking on the other person. And because I'm sitting here rolling dice in the lid and I'm not taking up too much space, I'm not, screaming like I was in Spaceteam.
Yeah, you've done a real, 180.
Yeah, and this was it's quiet, it's more self-focused and pushing yourself to play a game. She saw me playing it and immediately was interested because it wasn't combative. So kind of back to your point, Pete, a couple episodes ago, and Rick, you guys talked about competitive and combative games. This is a really nice middle ground of being competitive without being backstabby.
Right.
And the dice rolling really brought people in. So literally the whole point of our show is to bring people into gaming. This game brought it in, and now she wants to play the expansion. And she wants, every time I play, I actually have a harder time getting a solo game out. I'm actually pretty impressed with it. So Roll Player is quite the game.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about my favorite coffee shop game, currently my favorite coffee shop game. Definitely one of my favorite games that I have played in the last year or so. And it's not a type of game that would normally be something I would categorize as one of my favorite games. And that is Project L of 2020 by Michael or Mikkel Mikes, San Sokal, and Adam Spanel. I apologize if I butchered any of that. But it was developed by Borcubator and published by Asmodee. And so picture Tetris with other people, without the timer, without the falling polyminos or tetraminos in the case of Tetris. And in this game, you have these plastic polyminos, could be 1, 2, 3, or 4 unit pieces that look like Tetris pieces. And you have black and white puzzles out in a market with decks of puzzles to replace those that are taken away by players. And you get 3 actions per turn. You have these polyminos, and you can take a puzzle, you can upgrade one of your current Tetris type pieces, you can place a piece, and there's actually a 4th action. The 4th action is what's known as a master action, where you can play one piece in each puzzle that you currently have in front of you, but you can only play that action once per turn. And the game ends when the stack of black puzzles runs out. And once that happens, you finish the current round, everyone has one more full round, and then there's this thing called finishing touches, where in finishing touches, it's not quite a full round, but instead you can place additional pieces to try and finish puzzles, but there is a point cost to doing that. The game is engine building. It's puzzles and engine building in a lot of ways. What I love about Project L, aside from it just being gorgeous on the inside and sleek on the outside, is that it can be taught in less than 5 minutes. It sweeps across the table. It's for many types of people. I think it can be taught more quickly and simply than a lot of classic games like backgammon or checkers. You can play it first thing in the morning before you go to work. You could play it right before bed. You could play it on a lunch break. I looked at this game on my friendly local game store shelf for probably a month, and I kept passing it by because this is this plain black box with this blue L on it, and it says white Project L. I'm like, oh, what's this about? What's this about? I should look into that online. And I kept passing it by, and eventually I picked it up and I turned it over, and I'm like, this is not my typical type of game, but I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to give this a go because I'm always looking for types of games that will expand my horizons and I can introduce other people to. And so I bought it, I took it home, I played it, and after I played it a second and a third time, I immediately went back to that store and bought a second copy and sent it right to my dad. And if that's not an endorsement, I don't know what is. And he played it with friends and family, and they all loved it. And they, not only that, they loved it so much that every single one of the people my dad played it with were energized enough to send me 3 or 4 emails and dozens of text messages and send me phone calls, call me on the phone and tell me about their experience with Project L, what they liked, what they didn't like, what rules gaps they had found and how to fix them. And there are a couple, but not bad.
But it really lit them on fire. And
it really lit them on fire. It lit me on fire.
So you would play this game on a train. You could play this game on a plane. You could play this game in the rain, but can you play it in a coffee shop?
Okay, Dr. Seuss.
Sam, you absolutely can play it in a coffee shop. Guaranteed. It will be a little bit tight if you have a small cafe table with 4 people. You can definitely do it with 2. If you have a slightly larger cafe table, you can play it with 3 or 4, which is the max. Mm-hmm. But honestly, if you had a second copy of this game and you just mix it all together, there's no real reason. You might have to make a tweak here or tweak there. There's no real reason why you couldn't play with more than 4 people if you really wanted to.
That's cool.
It's also the case that, and it's only $35, it's not a $50-$60 box at all. And it has a number of expansions coming out. So check those out as well. The Ambassador Pack, the Ghost Piece Pack, the Finesse Ambassador Pack. And I would pick up any expansion for Project L blindly without knowing anything about it. I loved it so much.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're moving from a cerebral game with a lot of little plastic props, and we're moving to a mind-reading game with one big plastic prop. The next game is Wavelength. Came out in 2021, designed by Alex Haig, Justin Vickers, and Wolfgang Warsch. And Wavelength is this really simple social game for 2 teams, and it asks players to read the minds of one of their teammates, and that person changes every round. When it's your turn to have your mind read, you secretly set a target on this large shuttered dial, which is the game's centerpiece, in a way that no one else can see it, and you're going to say place it at 3/4 from along the way. And then you close a shutter over this whole thing, and now no one can see it. You place it out so everybody can see the shutter. Next, you pick a very broad category, like a scale from love to hate, and you display that category to the group. Now, picturing in your mind's eye where you place that target behind the shutter, you decide that you love lima beans about exactly as much as that dial indicates. So you tell your team lima beans, and you hope they know your palate well. Then your team hems and haws and debates among themselves, adjusting this pointer, which they can see and interact with, so that it hopefully points to the target that you selected, which they can't see or interact with. And once they finalize their answer, you pull back the shutter to reveal just how badly they've got it wrong. This is a really easy game to learn and to bring people into. It stays really compact, and you're unlikely to lose pieces. It's also the sort of game where it breaks up easily into rounds, so if someone has to skedaddle early, you can end on a high note and an easy getting off point. It's an exciting game. It's unlike a lot of these other games because it's more for extroverts and might be better to bring some of those folks into the hobby. It hits a different note than some of these other games.
It also seems like it fits the stats nerd in me, like, right on the money. I keep seeing Wavelength, and this is definitely one that I'm like, I should buy it, but I'm gonna wait to hear what Rick says about it. And as we've been talking, it's been ordered, so
Nice.
Moving from mind reading in Wavelength, I am so excited to introduce SHŌBU, which I guess I'm not really introducing it because we have written a review on it already. So go check that out. This game is designed by Manilos Vranas and Jamie Sajdak and published by Smirk and Laughter Games. And it is a modern abstract game, dueling game, and it's played on 4 4x4 grid boards. And I say it's a mind-reading game in some senses is because I find this game so difficult to predict how it's going to turn out. It feels like a classic, and I simply feel classy playing this game. I feel like I should have a margarita. I should be dressed to the nines. It's just aesthetically very pleasing. I love how much it makes you think and seemingly outwit your opponent, only to risk everything changing during your opponent's turn. I just cannot predict how this game is going to twist and turn and make you think.
Can I ask, is that, so there are games like, party games, like we didn't playtest this game at all, or games like Flux, which have constantly evolving end conditions and stuff like that. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Or could you walk me through a little bit of what you mean by things can change?
Yeah, things can change as in, depending on how your opponent moves their pieces, which are stones, little rocks on these wooden boards, will change completely your strategy in an instant.
Got it.
Yeah, because you have to make sure that you stay alive, of course, right? And you're just playing off of your opponent. And so you might have an idea, you might have a strategy, and then that just goes up in smoke. And it might come back in a round or two, but you have to be on your feet. You have to be ready.
Cool, that's neat. I like that.
It's not like Flux or, you know, a game like that in that the game mechanics introduce all of this randomness or chaos at all. The game mechanics are quite stable. I think for me, all of the seeming randomness and chaos, which isn't actually randomness and chaos at all, but it all comes from player error. I should be looking at board 1 and I'm looking at board 3 because that's where I think the action is happening, and I'm happen to be incorrect for that term. I'm like, oh shoot. So something entirely unpredictable to me happens and I was just looking in the wrong place, and hey, lesson learned.
That's cool. That's a cool concept of like a dueling game.
Yeah, I also think, though, that there's this element of, even if you've played it multiple times, which I have at this point, it's more than just looking in the wrong spot, because you can be trying to look at all the boards, all 4 boards, if you will, and you're still going to miss something. You're still not going to be able to predict all of the ways that the game could change just through your opponent's move.
And you could think that you're messing up your opponent's strategy when really they don't even care about that board. They're on board 1.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think it's silly in some ways that one of the biggest reasons that I like this game so much is because it frustrated my opponent so much more than me. I was almost enthralled by the ever-changing nature, so to seem, of the strategy and what needed to be done. And that was just the headspace that I was in. I was ready for this challenge. I was ready for this seemingly, I mean, it's completely abstract, simple pieces, beautiful game that just created this whole entire world that I was sucked into and needing to pay all attention to. Everything else on my to-do list, every other stress or worry of my day was completely gone because I had to pay so much attention to this game.
It's funny, that right there is like, I think for me, the biggest selling point for a coffee shop game. It's like, oh, a game that can make me have fun at a coffee shop instead of writing my dissertation. This is amazing.
Yeah, you will pay no mind to the steamer going on that coffee machine because you'll be so entranced in this game.
That's exciting. That's cool.
So there are a dozen games, a gamer's dozen, because gamers do mental arithmetic, so a dozen is a dozen. 3 from each of us. Thank you so much for listening to the Corex and Coffee Cast. We hope that you got something out of each of our different opinions. On some games we definitely agreed, on some we disagreed, and we hope to do that in the future in one form or another as we continue forward. Thank you so much for sticking with us through the first 10 episodes, Season 1 of Corex and Coffee Cast. We will be taking a brief break, but we will be back with all new content for Season 2 in just a few weeks, where we're going to be discussing more specific topics about tabletop games and specific games as well. So Keegan and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I am so proud of all of us, of of Rick and Pete for putting on, being our steadfast hosts, and for our listeners. Thank you, listeners, for getting us this far.
Could not have done it without you. So with that in mind, please do consider supporting us either through our podcast. You can support us on any of the podcast streaming services with a monthly subscription, but that's entirely voluntary. You subscribing to our podcast with some sort of donation does not increase or decrease or limit your content in any sort of way. It's entirely free. All of our content is entirely free, but the link for that subscription is in the show notes below if you're interested in that.
And whether you support us monetarily or no, please like and subscribe and sign up to get alerts when we post new content. Please visit our website at www.corexandcoffee.com, and please consider supporting us on Patreon or through our merch store.
Until next time, folks, I'm your host, Pete Steele.
And I'm your other host, Rick Hendricks.
Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you in just a few weeks.
Take care, all.
Bye. See you in season 2.
Bye.
Bye.
What's left to say? We're at the end of the first season, and it's kind of incredible. We've had some laughs, some tears, mostly mine when editing, until 3 a.m. But that's all over now, until it happens again for season 2. My hope is we'll have less redundant endings, and someone will figure out where all these quotes are from. Maybe you even have some suggestions. Leave us a comment, and I'll do my best to read it before anyone else does. Ego strength is not a value in this company. I'm being told from our legal team that this is a joke. Our legal team is also a plastic skull on my desk named Herbert, and his name is subject to change. Now that we're down to 2 listeners, thank you both for your support and your listening. Yeah, joking aside, we love you all. Corax and Coffee Cast is brought to you by your stout-hearted hosts, Pete Steele and Rick Hendricks, with special guests Sarah Vasa and Keegan King. Me, the guy that does all the music, production, and editing, primarily for the glory. So as you can imagine, I'm pretty upset, because there's no real glory. If you like this podcast, you're an odd duck, but you'll probably enjoy our website, corexandcoffee.com, where you'll find written reviews, game unboxing videos, print and play content, and all kinds of other stuff. You can support us on Patreon, or in the link in the show notes through Anchor. And please, like, comment, and rate us on Apple Podcasts. We can only get better with your help and your suggestions. Last quote of the week for season 1, and even though it felt warm and safe, I knew it had to end. It's never good to live in the past for too long. As for the future, thanks to you, it doesn't seem so scary anymore. It could be whatever I wanted it to be. Corax and Coffee. Tabletop gaming. Caffeinated.